Work is changing. The question is, are you? Welcome to 99 Problems But Work Ain't One, the new podcast series from How Now that will help you prepare for the fast-changing world of work. I'm your host, Nelson Sivalingam, and I'll be talking to disruptive startups, contrarian thinkers, global leaders, and real game changers, and asking them the burning questions about the challenges we face at work, from scaling cultures and adopting technology to improving well-being and building fast-learning organizations that are prepared for the future of work. We get the insights, tactics, and actionable nuggets of knowledge to put to work. Hello and welcome to the show. In this week's episode, I'm joined by Emma Leonis, HR transformation guru at Lace Partners. Having recently published their Future of HR Shared Services white paper, it was ideal timing for Emma to talk to us about HR today, where it's heading, and what it can do in the meantime. We discuss a whole range of topics: how HR teams can say no more often to prevent doing too much, how they can collaborate to bring others on their journey, and how to prioritize the human in human resources when creating an incredible employee experience. And that's just scratching the surface. Here's my absolutely fascinating conversation with Emma. I'm super excited to have this. We were just talking about it before we started recording. We only ever seem to speak on a webinar or a podcast, never had a normal coffee. So we'll have to do that when the world goes back to any kind of normality.
We will. Probably multiple coffees to make up for the number of virtual sessions that we've had.
That's right. So let's kick off with, I know just over a year ago, I remember reading your HR on the Offensive research piece. And one of the things that stood out for me is you said HR is trying too hard to be everything for kind of all people. Mm-hmm. What did you mean by that?
Yeah, so I guess just as a people function, and us as, HR, L&D professionals, loving what we do about our jobs, we care about our customers, so our internal customers, employees, line managers, business leaders, and we want by nature to do the right thing. Which sometimes means that we do things perhaps that we shouldn't be doing, i.e. we get into the weeds because we want to help and actually it's someone else's responsibility to do that, but we see it as the right thing to support. And there's nothing wrong with that, but I guess it poses a challenge then when you think about, can we do everything to the right standard that we want to, and what are our priorities? And kind of when we were looking at that and thinking about it with the HR directors as part of that research, I guess it wasn't really the challenge of, we don't know what we should be doing. It was, how do we prioritize? That was the challenge. It's when do you say no, and how do you say no in a supportive way?
And that was like just over a year ago. Do you think things are still the same today?
Yeah, well, it's a really interesting question. I think the past year in particular, given the pandemic, has probably actually forced us to prioritize. And whether we've done that consciously or subconsciously, I think we've had no choice but to be a little bit more ruthless and selective, perhaps as HR practitioners and as businesses as a whole. But I guess my one worry with that would be, let's not fall back into our old norms and our old behaviors when things get a little bit more stable in the future.
And kind of one of the other things you talk about is kind of sharing that load with other departments, and other departments stepping up and taking on some of the responsibilities, so you can kind of clear out the noise and HR can focus on what matters. In what ways do you think other departments could share that HR load?
Yeah, really, really interesting one to think about. And I remember I was sort of playing devil's advocate with myself a little bit when we were writing that report and thinking about it. And I think one of the things I said was, should operations, for example, take over a lot of the admin that HR does today? So wherever possible, clearly we want to digitize and automate. But the other piece is that our pretty routine and transactional admin could ops do it if it's about operational excellence, etc. So that is an option. I don't necessarily think that's the right model for everyone at all. Another thing would be, well, actually, could we perhaps partner with, the business better? The business, are they doing what we're expecting them to do? If they're not, why is that? This isn't a case of saying, well, you should be doing that, so I'm going to lob this over the fence to you and giving things that way, because that just won't fly. Actually, you'll have the adverse reaction to that. But it's about, I guess, finding the right balance when we're asking the business to do things. And maybe there's something around marketing. If we think about attracting talent, into the function as much as also business as a whole, clearly HR has a big role to play in that from a talent attraction and an EVP standpoint. But we've got marketeers in all of our businesses that's their day job, to get the brand out there, get it, well established, make it resonate, and then the customer lens to that. Could they perhaps play more of a support role with us in some of those things?
Yeah, no, and this definitely, I guess, your more recent research into the kind of future of HR shared services, it's
Mm,
kind of an extension of this idea
it
of
is.
kind of eliminating those silos, dropping the walls, and bringing more kind of
Yeah.
collaboration across the business, and to really kind of leverage those skills and capabilities that you already might have in the organization. So to kind of start off with, set the scene for me. What is the current, when you say HR shared services model, what does that currently look like?
Oh, varies by organization, Nelson. There isn't a one size fits all, as you know. But I guess kind of what really came through was that a lot of organizations have moved to Auric. So they do have a shared service model in some shape or form, be that they maybe have local admin teams in their business units, or in the local markets, that are perhaps more of a virtual network, if I call it that, within shared services. Or other organizations have centralized a lot of activity. So there's a formal one team of shared services. Sometimes that's in one physical location, or one or two, three hubs. Challenge now is actually, does it need to be? Given that we can all work remotely, that actually is an opportunity for new talent.
Yeah,
And then I think, what really came through as well was, whilst organizations are exploring the use of digital, the new services that perhaps can come into shared services as well, they also still need to make sure that they get the basics right.
yeah,
It's that age old dilemma of, how do you balance more whilst doing the same thing really well, because you've only got so much capacity to do
yeah.
both.
And so that kind of leads us nicely to talking about what are the key drivers that are kind of causing this model to change and be disruptive.
A number of them. Probably one of the biggest ones, and we talk about it quite a lot, and it is a bit of a buzzword, but it doesn't mean it's not important. It really is experience. I know it's something that you and I have talked about before, and obviously thinking about the how now does, it's all about how do you empower experience through learning. So if you think about experience, it's, well, how do I want to contact someone to get an answer to my query or my issue, or just to basically do something for myself? And shared services linking to tier zero tends to be the start of that journey. So definitely, trends there around, how do you optimize that channel strategy? What does contact your way mean? What does experience mean for you? And how do you design an experience through your shared service model that thinks about capabilities, it thinks about emotional intelligence of how you support individuals, that kind of human touch, and balancing human with automation and digitization as well. We're seeing a lot more of that, and not forgetting the human in HR, so to speak.
So how would that, break it down for me in terms of changing the structure of HR? Are we saying, are we splitting it in a way where we've got kind of a HR person sitting in every function and is kind of tailoring the requirements to that particular part of the business? I guess that's what you tried to do with the kind of a HR business partner,
Mm-hmm.
which is quite contentious. Some people like it, or
Mm-hmm.
some people don't. But what does that actually look like in terms of a structure?
Yeah, so in quite a few organizations, they may have come from that legacy world, as you've said there, Nelson, of having someone who is that point of contact in the business, that's maybe doing the generalist work and some of the strategic work, and then all of the admin work was within shared services. But if you automate more and more and more, which organizations are doing, and it's the right thing to do, with that balance of human, as I said, you then elevate the role that your legacy shared service kind of tier one type tier two resource could play, i.e. your advisors. So they can take on more activities, new services even, maybe like health and safety, for example, in some organizations. It could be that they're even, looking at owning the brand element of recruitment within shared services. I've seen that in some organizations. So if they're doing that, equally, there's the question of, with your business partners, that role should continue to be strategic, but therefore fewer in number. How do you keep that business line of sight and connectivity? And I think that's one of the challenges with the model of HR in a lot of organizations at the moment is, you've got business partners, you've got shared services, and you've got COEs, and they may well all be doing brilliant things individually, but because they are individual teams, there is a propensity that they work in silos, and you lose that end-to-end line of sight of delivering the service to the customer and maintaining that business relationship. So for me, actually, it's not about really the roles you have and the structure of them. It's how do you create the networks and the connections and conversations that promote that listening and continuous improvement activity.
And how do you think this changes the skill requirements for people who are working within the people function? Because if it's changing their roles and responsibilities, how is it changing what a HR person should know or have in terms of skills?
Yeah, and this is a really hard one for me to answer because I know one of the things on your quickfire questions, not to preempt it necessarily, was what was the one skill? And I'm like, there isn't just one. We've talked a lot in the past about thinking, particularly about business partners or people consultants, as I'd like to perhaps now reframe that role to, being much more data and insight savvy. That's a given in my opinion. Actually, when you think about what really matters to the majority of people in the organization from an experience standpoint, it's having someone who gets them, who will listen, and who'll do the right thing. So that, I guess, comes down to kind of that emotional intelligence kind of mindset that you might have or behavior that you might have. I think there's also elements around integrity. So doing the right thing, but also saying no more, which comes back to your first question, around are we trying to be all things to all people? And integrity is a massive one for every part of the HR function, but particularly I think for business partners to be
Yeah.
able to say no and to do that with justification and curious thinking.
Yeah.
That's a really interesting one too. Do you need process experts or
Yeah.
actually do you need more curious thinkers?
It's a skill that's coming up a lot, right? It's a fundamental skill for all parts of the business to be curious.
Mm.
But interestingly, with this kind of shared services model, what are the kind of lessons you can learn from other shared services like finance or marketing or customer service? What are there any lessons we can take from that?
Yeah, I definitely think so, Nelson. I think particularly from marketing and customer service and operations, with marketing and customer services to start with, for me, that's, that back to that brand piece, they're so clear what a great experience looks like for them. I remember speaking to an organization as part of the research and the shared services paper and asking them, so what are your 5 brand pillars? And they told me what they were. And I was like, okay, so actually, does HR know about these and are they translating them? Because they were really simple, but really powerful. And therefore, why would we not be thinking about starting to align, the brand pillars in marketing and customer services into other functions, in HR, etc. And then operations are typically in shared services for shared service ops really good at that operational execution. But again, operational execution should never be, in my opinion, at the expense of doing the right thing
Yeah.
to the person that you're supporting. So it's about having that balance of brilliant basics and kind of measures that support that, but sometimes not worrying if you miss a KPI. Because
Yeah.
if you've missed a KPI, but the outcome for the end user was even better than it could have possibly been had you had a green KPI,
Yeah.
actually, it's the right thing to do. So don't ding yourself too much in that regard.
Yeah, I definitely see that even from what we do. I mean, it seems simple to say there's a lot we can learn from each other, but the idea of, when you're deploying a new bit of software into an organization, you probably have a product marketing person, depending on the type of business you are, who's got great expertise on how to drive adoption and engagement. And very rarely are they involved as a part of that kind
Mm,
of implementation process. And
yeah.
it is really kind of tapping into, again, those kind of collective skills and knowledge that you might have in the organization. But yeah, we definitely see that. Another one we can how now we can definitely relate to is one of the points you make, and you mentioned this earlier, that the whole idea of contact your way and the kind of
Mhm.
self-service approach is becoming even more popular within HR. How do you strike the right balance between the kind of push and pull approach?
Yeah, yeah. And I think that is a tough one to strike a balance on. Because you could be pushing loads of content out there, but it just not getting traction. And therefore the question is why? And I think for me, it's actually starting to ask that question, well, why? And listen to what people are saying. So in striking that balance, sometimes less is more. So try something, get feedback on it, like with the content that you might be pushing out in the learning space, for an example. Actually have people rate that how easy was it to access? Two, how relevant was it for you? Have you got any suggestions for the future, just as an example? The same with other content you might have. I tend to find that, and when I work with organizations, they have so much content, and it's not that the content's the issue. Sometimes it's just I couldn't find it. So you're pushing it out there, but you're not pushing it out through a mechanism that works for someone. So that pull needs to be there, but you'll only know the pull if you ask the questions to enable you to understand what it is someone wants. And I think that's back to that curious and questioning mindset that we need more of, I think, in the function, and not just assume.
This might be unfair in a leading question, but our hypothesis around this is the reason why issues like this go on for so long in terms of content that's not largely used is typically because no one's measuring the kind of effectiveness of it, and the data is completely missing. So out of sight, out of mind. I don't know.
Yeah.
I've put it out there. I couldn't tell you. Do you find that is the case, or what are the other reasons for ending up in a situation like that?
I think that's a big one. So I think it's one of those things where we do something, we put it out there, we move on to the next piece, and out of sight, out of mind sometimes. It's probably not because we don't want to ask the question, how effective was it? But another priority's come up, and there's only so many hours in the day. And in the report, I asked one of those questions. I said, so how do you measure the effectiveness of what you do? And a lot of the time it was, I'll use KPIs around throughput times, contact resolution, and CSAT or NPS from an experience side, which is all very well and good, but go deeper than that. Just ask the basic question of, did you like it? Thumbs up, thumbs down. Look at the volumes. How often was it used? When was it last updated? And I think the measurement is a big piece, and not having the time to do it. We can't make excuses though.
Yeah.
That's the thing.
And why do you think, I can see there's the growing conversation around applying lean and agile principles to the way you do things within the people function. Yet, typically we still see organizations who you might talk about lean and agile, but actually it's still the big bang, let's roll this out. Where is that gap, and what's kind of fueling that gap between we're aware of these principles and we're probably applying it effectively in other parts of the business, but what stopping us from applying it within the people function?
I think some of that's mindset. I really do think it is. HR, and again, this is me generalizing, and not everyone will agree with me, but I do think there are elements of HR. The practitioners can tend to revert to their comfort zone of process, compliance, and by its nature, that doesn't encourage, creative thinking. So there's something around the mindset, and therefore the people that we have in HR, and that the backgrounds they come from and how open they are to that kind of thing. I also think sometimes we have inertia. It's not that we don't want to do small things, but we just think, oh, if I do that, what if it fails? If I chunk this thing up and I say there's 5 parts to it and I'm going to do them one by one versus wait till the end and do the big bang thing, if part 1 fails with my stakeholder group, the culture in our organization is a blame culture. So that might not work. And again, it's a generalization, but I do think there's something in that. And again, it comes back to a behavior of being bold sometimes, to not be afraid to do something, or don't even ask for permission. Just do it by stealth. If it's a small incremental piece, do it by stealth. The likelihood is that it will probably get good feedback. If it doesn't, you can manage it, as long as it's not something that's really going to cause problems like no one gets paid. then I think there's something in there. But for me, it's the mindset piece, mindset, behaviors, and therefore that comes down to the right people in the teams and where we've got them from.
I'm really going off schedule here, Emma, so apologies.
That's all right.
Just interested to find out, how do you bring your kind of senior stakeholders on that journey, right? I meet incredible people leaders who really want to change the way they do things, incredible ideas, but they need to convince the powers above and bring them on this journey. What have you seen, obviously, as a part of your day-to-day is working in kind of HR transformation, digital transformation?
Yeah.
What's the best ways of bringing those senior stakeholders on the journey with you?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things that spring to mind. One of the first ones is we've probably already got some really great success stories that we have that we could share. We just might not know about them. So go and find those success stories and really kind of be bold and communicate those out. I think also then there's something around helping people, particularly on the business side, kind of understand what's in it for them, why things are really, really important to change. And again, telling that story, which is, this is what I need to do. This is why. You're not asking to change everything all in one go. Sometimes that's going to mean having a tough conversation. If you can find people in that business leadership group, or maybe even 2 or 3 levels down within the organization, beneath them, that are change advocates, use them to help kind of promote what you want to do, and maybe pilot something just in that particular small group to get you that success story to then help with the more senior conversation. Again, that senior leader might not even know that you've done it and it was a success. And it's like, oh my gosh, brilliant. Yes, let's do more of that. Tell me more about it. Or on the flip side of that, sometimes if you can win over someone who is extremely resistant to change, they can then become your biggest advocates. But that's a harder move to make, and probably takes a bolder leader than some of the other suggestions that I've had.
Ask for forgiveness, not permission. That's what you're saying.
Exactly. I am in some respects. Yeah.
Going back to one of the other interesting data points you had, which I thought was fascinating, which was, while 76% had operational measures in place, only 48% were collecting data on their employee experience, which says a lot, right? Which says a lot about what's happening, because if you're not measuring it, you're not managing it. So what can, I guess, the people functions do to be better at measuring the employee experience?
Yeah, I think for me, what was quite interesting was when I delved into sort of what people were doing to get feedback. Whilst a lot of organizations perhaps may have not had the formal measures, hence that 48% statistic, around collating NPS, for example, a lot of them had mechanisms in place as feedback loops to get feedback. So it's sometimes the anecdotal data that can be as powerful as a thumbs up, thumbs down, or a 1-star to 5-star rating on content, or you might have that as an overall question: how helpful was I today with your query? Because a 1 or a 5, they tell you you're good or you're bad, but it's the why. So that anecdotal data, those conversations, they are probably the most powerful thing. So use the networks that you might have. You might have an experience forum that you could set up that's, a handful of individuals from different parts of the business. They're just passionate about changing things and doing the right thing. Get them together, ask them to become your voice on the ground. You'll have business partners who'll be playing that role. Make sure they share that feedback in the HR leadership team meetings with their shared service teams and counterparts. Bring that feedback back to the business to say, I've heard this. Is this correlating with what you're expecting? So for me, that was quite important, actually, and a bit of a revelation that we have actually a lot of the information there. It's just combining volume data, operational measures, the formal experience measures with that anecdotal information to get that end-to-end view of what's working and what's not.
Yeah, no, completely agree. And one of the things I wanted to touch on was, I love at Lace Partners, you talk about people purpose. And so I wanted to ask you, what is people purpose?
Really big question. Thank you, Nelson.
I like to keep things light here.
I mean, that means different things to different people. It really, really does. I mean, when I was thinking about this, I guess at the end of the day, it's, what does it look like and feel like to work in the organization? We go to work because we want to feel fulfilled by what we're doing, and we want to know that we're giving value through what we're doing. And everybody has different ways as to what that means for them. No one person is the same. So that purpose piece comes down to, I think, an element of, what are your values as well? So if you're saying that you are authentic, that you're open, that you care, I mean, care is one of our values at Lace. It sounds sort of fluffy. In some respects it is, but it's really integral, because it means that we listen to people, that we act on what is said, that we want to do the right thing. And integrity for us is part of that care element. And defining people purpose is kind of easy. You could just come up with anything that sort of sounds sensible, but living it and really delivering it, I think, is more of the challenge, like walking the walk and talking the talk, so to speak. So it's less about kind of what is people purpose. For me, I think it is, how do you deliver that people purpose, which goes back to that listening, that acting, that engaging piece. that I've talked
Have
about.
you come across organizations that you've worked with or examples where you think, they've really come up with a great people purpose and really executed it well? Do you have examples of what good looks like?
Yeah, like I can't give you kind of a precise example because I can't think of it specifically off the top of my head in terms of like the quote, but I've worked with a number of pharmaceutical organizations,
Right.
for example, the same as healthcare providers. What they do is all about making people healthier, improving people's lives. And that is such a clear purpose as a business that then it's so translatable back into the organizations. Like, we want to make the way that you work really powerful, engaging, be the best that you can be, so that we can help our people that we serve, so customers, in the care homes, or be that you're working again to create, drugs for people, that we can then make that better for them.
Yeah.
So they tend to be really, really strong in that and have very clear employee value propositions that aren't just about, this a branding kind of effort, because there is an element of that sometimes, I think, and it's important because your value proposition should be linked to your brand, but it's more than just that. It's about, what can you get from working here? What can you expect? And then what do we expect from you? And what's that exchange, I guess, of those values together?
Yeah, I think it's a great way of almost giving the people function focus, and it helps them probably come up with the North Star metrics that they should be looking at to see if they're delivering on that value prop. Yeah, no, definitely see that. All right, now we go to my favorite part of the show, Emma, where I'm going to fire some questions at you relatively quickly, and you're going to give me answers relatively quickly, and we're going to go from there. So, as I mentioned earlier, let's start with, what's the most important skill a HR manager needs?
Can I have more than one? Because I can't possibly just choose one.
Go on, we can cheat on this one.
So I would say integrity, because that's for every role in HR. And I would also probably say curious thinker. So I'll be a bit different to the norm. I'm not going to say data, insights, that kind of stuff. To me, that's a given. Curious thinker and an innovator and integrity as well.
Yeah. And you've obviously got a lot of experience in seeing through HR transformation projects. What are the top reasons why these transformation projects fail?
I think you hit the nail on the head earlier, actually, Nelson, with one or two of your questions, which was about that business engagement. So, HR sometimes thinks, this is what we need to do, this is why, and just full steam ahead, railroads and goes through that process. But you've got to keep checking back with the business, because you're ultimately trying to do something to help with outcomes they're looking to achieve. So business engagement is one. I'd say also employee engagement linked to that too. So the leadership piece, and then the lower levels in the organization, and trying to do too much. So that big bang element versus incremental change.
Just going off schedule again, Emma, do you find in some of these transformation projects, they might even get the senior stakeholders engaged, but too often they don't get the end users or the involved? Do you find that in your experience as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm seeing more and more now a recognition that there needs to be that, proper voice of the customer input into the design of an HR transformation program, which I guess you could kind of frame as experience-led design of HR transformation, which is brilliant to see. But it's all very well, again, doing that in design. For me, it's about constantly going back to those groups that you formed to input to design, and stress testing as you go through. Again, back to that kind of point of, don't wait till the very end to make sure it's right. Let's use this agile, iterative approach. And those groups that we had, keep going back to them. Use them post go live as part of continuous improvement. So definitely seeing more of a recognition of that, which is really powerful to see.
That is good to see. I work in the people function. I'm listening to this podcast. Tell me one tactic I can apply tomorrow when I go in to improve the employee experience at my company.
And it's a quickfire question. I feel like I should give you a quickfire answer. Probably goes back to that curiosity point, which is, actually, I've got two. One is to ask, why are we doing something? I.e., do we have a clear outcome we're looking to achieve? Has someone asked for it? And what are we trying to do? And then also the second one would be to listen. So just to stop and actually listen. Go and speak to someone you've not spoken to before. Might just be you just decide to put a random catch up in with someone. Ask them, and then just listen to them. Ask them a simple question and just listen to that.
Yeah, it's one of our values, Emma, is we have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. It's to listen more than we speak. So
love it.
Yeah. Then what's one HR trend that you really think is going to blow up over the kind of next year or two?
Yeah, I think, and given I'm talking to you, some people might say I'm a little bit biased here, but I definitely think there's something in the learning and talent space for sure. There's two lenses of it to me. We've talked quite a lot about the need for new skills in businesses, and digital being one of those, but there's loads of different new skills that we're going to need in the next year, as much as the next 5 years from now. So it's, where do you get those skills from, and how do you develop them? I think, Gartner in the 2021 HR priorities survey, I think, said that nearly 70% of HR professionals said for them that actually enhancing critical skills and competencies was a big priority this year. So that definitely for me is part of that talent and development piece, which leads on to the learning element of that, which is you can't keep buying talent from everywhere because there's only a finite skills pool from which to source talent. So I think, yes, last year, a lot of organizations had to move their onboarding, their learning, their development to digital because of the pandemic. But we're going to have to focus much more, I think, on, well, what is the right learning strategy? What are all the right ways of delivering that from a digital standpoint? What does that mean in terms of how we curate content, how we continuously improve it? So I really think in that learning space, we'll probably see more and more over the next year or so as well.
That's music to my ears. And no, it's great to see. I mean, especially I think COVID has expedited the conversation. We're making skills the currency that kind of fuels the entire employee experience. And how can you use this currency in different ways for the different touch points in the employee experience? And I think that is a conversation for another day, and we can probably spend an hour just on that. And in terms of, how can HR teams show that they care about people? It's not just about the HR admin and compliance, and this varies. It's from early stage companies who are just getting their first HR person to sort out the admin stuff, to larger companies who might still just be using them from kind of predominantly admin tasks.
Yeah.
How can a HR team show they really care about people?
I think, again, it goes back to just that listening and that empathy. So, if you are there and you're responding over email or on the phone or on chat, whatever channel it might be, to someone who has a need, be it a simple need of I want to roll over some holiday, how do I do that? Because they're new. Or be it a more complex need, such as I'm a line manager and I'm dealing with a really, really stressful situation right now. I've got a wellbeing issue in my team, and it's potentially quite a serious one. I need help. Just being empathetic, listening, but also I think then acting on that in the right way. And then other ways to show how they care. Again, I think it's so with the acting piece, thinking about what really is important. What are people saying? Are you living the values that you're espousing? And if you're not, how can you perhaps do more in that space? And also celebrating those successes. That's part of showing that you care. I mean, even within the own HR function, because there's an element of, do we show our own teams that we value them enough, as much as also showing the business that we value the business and employees in our overall organizations. So again, sharing those successes, saying thank you, that the small things that we would normally do with any team, but there's elements of that thing for me I think we can do more of within the function itself.
Sure. The book you recommend the most to people leaders and why?
I was really hoping you wouldn't ask me this question because I feel like I should
be one of my favorites.
Yeah, I feel like I should have some super highbrow answer to this. That I've been reading XYZ by ABC. I do read Harvard's Business Review, that kind of stuff. Some of the little articles in there. I guess I don't know. I've read a couple of books recently. They're fiction ones, and this is completely not in the HR space. But if you just read some of those books, it just makes you think, and you think, oh my Lord, I'm reading a murder mystery. Hey, why don't I just ask why more? Like, I need to play Cluedo in this, which goes back to that curiosity point. But no, on a serious note, I have just bought a book called People Not Paperclips. I can't remember the author, unfortunately, as it's upstairs, not in front of me. But it's about employee experience and about organizational design. It's relatively short. It's come highly recommended by a couple of different colleagues of mine. And I like EX and I like continuous improvement and sort of thinking about that. So maybe try that one.
Yeah,
hopefully put a different perspective on things.
We'll add a link in the show notes. What do you say when someone asks you, What's your job?
Oh, oh, oh. God, that's a really good question. So I don't. It's not. I'm a management consultant because that's really boring and really dry. That I work with, HR leaders to make their people experience better for their organizations. And part of that for me, which is part of my job, is I do project delivery, and I love doing that with clients and being hands-on. But I also love just talking about what's going on and kind of that challenge question, like we are now, Nelson, all the things we've talked about. So I wouldn't say I'm an academic or anything like that, because I'm definitely not. I'm not a researcher, but my job, a bit of a curious thinker, a challenger, provocative questions. Yeah.
Yeah.
Bit of a waffly answer, but hey.
Last one for you, Emma, is one skill you'd like to develop and why?
Well, on a personal note, saying no more. How ironic is that, given what we've just talked about? But that's because I'm so passionate about what I do and what we do at Lace and my job and everything. But definitely say no more. Personal skill in general. I would love to get back into writing my music that I used to do lots and lots of. So this is a really personal thing about me. So I play violin and piano. I haven't played my piano for a very long time, as it's at my parents'. So I haven't played it properly for 13 odd years. But I used to just love sitting and composing, effectively film score. So not classical, like no defined genre, just playing what comes into your head and kind of going with the flow of that. So that would be a skill I would love to pick back up again and develop more on a personal note.
I'd like to know that next HR podcast is with you playing in the background.
I could play music in response to questions when you say, so what do we need to do? And then the tone of the music is the
Emma, it's been absolute pleasure. Thank you very much for taking the time out and coming on the show. Always enjoy our conversations. And until the next recording with both of us on, catch up soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Nelson. Great to speak to you.
And there you have it. Thanks for checking out my conversation with Emma. If you want to know more about Lace Partners and the work they do, plus their Future of HR Shared Services white paper, then check out the links in the show notes. And of course, we love feedback at How Now. So if you've got any feedback or even questions, or you just want to say hello, then do get in touch via our social channels, where you'll find those in the show notes as well. We hope you've enjoyed the episode. Please do think about subscribing, sharing, leaving us a review, or telling a friend. It goes a long way in helping us and the show grow. Thanks, and see you next time.